Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Dawn Michael, and today we're going to be talking about a very important topic. And a few of you have sent me questions on this, and that is problems with excessive masturbation. And this is not just for men, because a lot of the times I will talk about issues with men, but women have also chimed in that they're having problems with excessive masturbation. And the reason being is we have all been in a locked down situation, or our lives have not been as they were before. So for the past year, we've changed a lot of things in our lives. Things are different. And I'm going to go over some of the reasons why this is a problem, both from a psychological perspective as well as from a physical perspective. So, as many of you know who have listened to me, I am talking about issues that most people don't address. There's not much information on these problems that people are having. And so I'm just going to give you the facts and give you information that people have asked me questions on, as well as while counseling people, they will have problems with these issues. So I'm going to get started with the question. And if you want to send me a question, please visit my website, thehappyspouse.com. You can go into the contact section and you can put down question for the show. Or if you want a private question answered, I do charge a small fee, but I will answer your question. And that's been very helpful for many people, especially if they're not ready to have a counseling session. They can always get their question answered. So without further ado, let's get into some of the questions that you've sent to me. So this one is, please help. Ever since the lockdown, I have been masturbating more often, and now it has created a problem in my relationship. So this is somebody who is in a relationship where they have increased the masturbation, and it is having an effect on the sex in their relationship. Now, I've gotten other questions where somebody is not in a relationship and they still feel that they're having problems with excessive masturbation. Now, let's define excessive masturbation. So that would be a week. So now you're masturbating more often. So you've increased it to maybe several times a day or several times a week. And you're noticing that it's creating a problem in your life, or you're noticing that it is affecting the way that you feel. And obviously, if you're in a relationship, you're having problems in your relationship. So I'm just going to go over a couple of the topics that I'm going to be discussing further. And I'll just read down the list and then I will get back to it. Okay, so the first one is how it affects the mind and body and why that is so powerful. And so sometimes people feel so compelled that they don't have control over it. But the reality is, I will tell you, we all have control over our actions, but there is a reason that it feels so powerful. And I will continue with the list and we'll go back to that. So what it does is it creates a pattern or a habit. Anything that you do in your life that you consistently do for about 3 months, it starts to create a pattern. And so if it's taken 3 months to create that pattern, then sometimes it takes 3 months for you to lessen that pattern or for you to get rid of that pattern. And that's with most things in life, is it takes about 3 months to develop this pattern. So that can be anything that you do consistently. Okay, it gives a person something to do. And this has been a big problem during this lockdown, is that people have their regular schedule disrupted. They have more time. They're home more often. Maybe they used to drive to work and now they're not driving to work. So they have that extra hour where they're trying to fill it with something to do. And so, of course, masturbation is something that people enjoy doing. And so they will add that in instead of maybe something else, like picking up a new hobby or reading a book or getting involved in other aspects of their life. So I've seen a lot of that take place over the past year. It feels good. Okay. So masturbation feels good to a certain extent. And I'll get to that too. So people will do it because it feels good. But then if it becomes too excessive, it can actually not feel good, or it could feel good temporarily. It releases powerful hormones and chemicals in the brain, especially when people climax. And so now you've got the whole mind body thing going on. So not only psychologically are you kind of in this pattern, but because it releases such powerful chemicals and hormones in your body, it now has more of, I don't want to say addictive, but somewhat of a, I guess for a better word, addictive quality to it. It can for some people more than others. If you are doing something called edging, which people do, where you'll get to a point where you start looking for a particular video where that's what you want to climax to, and now maybe you were on the internet looking for 10 minutes, then it's up to half hour, now you're an hour into it. And what you're doing, and people don't realize, is it's actually spiking your adrenaline. So it comes to a point where you're like seeking out the video, and you're increasing your adrenaline. And then when you finally find that video, and it could be for some people a half hour later, an hour later, 2 hours later, sometimes people spend the entire day. And you can see where this can have a really profound negative effect if that's you. Now, what happens is when you're releasing all of this adrenaline, it's not a normal release of adrenaline, meaning that you're going to come down from it. And what happens to some people is they become depressed afterwards. So that can have a negative effect on all aspects of your life, because then you feel down. And then for you to want to feel good again, you go back to doing the excessive masturbation and probably watching the porn, and you kind of get into this cycle. And that needs to be broken, because that cannot continue time and time again. It can cause fatigue, exhaustion, and all kinds of other physical problems, not to mention the mental aspect of it. Okay. So I just talked about the depressive aspect. So not only are you releasing adrenaline, but that can create it so your dopamine goes down. So this is something that can create a depressive state. And people can actually do that to themselves. And not only can they do that to themselves with maybe the excess of masturbation, but then afterwards, they may feel bad about what they're doing. So they're ending up having negative talk, putting themselves down. And whenever you talk negatively to yourself, whenever you put out that negative vibe, people don't realize how powerful thoughts are. And thoughts have energy behind them. And if you're constantly in this negative energy cycle, then your whole body will be affected. You'll feel like you are tired, you're fatigued, you're down, you're depressed. And so that then can affect the chemicals in your brain. And so it's really, really important for people to be aware of that, because we actually can change that. We have the ability to change the way that we think about ourselves and to make ourselves feel better and be more positive. Thoughts are so, so powerful. Okay, the next thing. The next thing is changing your normal pattern. And as I said, this has been the danger with the lockdown, is it has affected people's normal everyday pattern, their normal everyday routine. And so that in itself leaves people feeling somewhat confused. And that confusion can even create a chaotic, out of control feeling. And so sometimes people will turn to either porn or masturbation to try to make themselves stop feeling that way. And so I'm going to go through some of the solutions for this in a minute for all of you. Okay, the other thing that it can do is it can make sex more difficult in a relationship. Anytime that you are in a relationship and you change your sexual pattern, so let's say now you're masturbating more often, it means that you're releasing more often, you're having an orgasm more often. And so the more that you do that, the less you're going to be doing that with your partner or your spouse. So it is going to interrupt your sex life. And also it interrupts your sex life mentally too. So it's not just a physical thing, it's also a mental thing. And I have seen so much of that happen in the past year, and it's been so detrimental to people's relationships. And you really do have to take control of that, because that could basically end a relationship where now you've become more interested in masturbation and pornography than actually making love with your spouse. And the reason being for that is sometimes it is easier to just take care of yourself and you're not dealing with the other person. But then what you're doing is you're not really dealing with life or reality, and you're shutting off the other person in your life. And it can become very lonely after a while if you really isolate yourself and do that. So if that's something that you're doing, you have to take a breather, you have to stop, you have to step back and reevaluate what's going on in your life and what's important in your life. The other thing about masturbation is it relieves stress. It relieves stress for a lot of people, and they will turn to that instead of finding other ways because, quite frankly, it's easier. It's easier to sit on your butt and look at a computer or think about something than it is to maybe go outside and exercise, or find a hobby or push yourself to do something else. And people can really get caught up in this routine. Now, what happens there is, again, it messes with the chemistry in your body. It messes with the dopamine. And so when you're exercising, it's actually a healthy release of adrenaline and dopamine, and you're moving your muscles, and physically, you're breathing, you're oxygenating. So exercise is super important, and it's a great reliever of stress. So now if you just eliminated the exercise and now you're just relieving your stress by masturbation and watching pornography, you are going to get, like I said in the beginning, where it may feel good, but then you are going to come down from it. And it is not going to be pleasant. And this is, again, how people just get themselves in a really bad place. Okay, another thing that happens is you're in control. So sometimes when people feel out of control and their life is chaotic, they can turn to porn and they can turn to porn and feel like they have something that they can control in their lives. And the issue with that is you are now setting up a bad situation for yourself, because that's false. It's not really true, because you're not living in reality when you're doing that, and you're not dealing with problems in life and so on and so forth. You're kind of burying your head, and you're using this as an escape. So I have gone over all of the problems that this can create: the excessive masturbation, the watching of porn, and I'm sure that some of you out there have experienced this, and you are connecting and understanding with what I'm saying. And so if you're feeling any of these things and it is creating a problem in your life, then obviously you need to take control, and you need to be able to get your life back and feel better. And ultimately, ultimately, you have created this, right? So you started this, you created this, which means that you can take the control back and you don't have to continue to do this. And so you do have choices. We all have choices. We all wake up in the morning and it's a brand new day, and we can all decide. Let's say tomorrow morning you make a decision. Hey, my life sucks at the moment. Why does it suck? Because of all these things I just mentioned, because you're doing things, excuse me, because you're doing things that are unhealthy, that are making your life suck. And so, with that being said, each person has the ability each morning to change their life. And the first thing when you wake up in the morning is to take control of your day. And that is taking control of your thoughts. If you have a bad thought, if you're thinking something negative, start to be aware of that first thing in the morning, because sometimes that negative thought will stay with you throughout the rest of the day. And if you can catch it early in the morning and you can start adding a gratitude into your life, you can create a schedule of what you're going to do for that day so that you're not going to turn to the porn if you're bored. You can add in an exercise. It's all about you making that decision every day. Now, you don't have to make the decision for the week. That's the good thing about this, is you're just making the decision for the day. And if you look at this as a decision for the day, it doesn't seem so overwhelming. So it's not like, oh, I can never go back to this, or I can never do this again. It's like, no, I'm making a decision for today to do something different or to stop what I've been doing. Okay, now I'm going to take a moment and say hello to all of you out there. Thank you for showing up, and answer some of your questions. And I might not be able to answer all of them, but I will do my best to go through them. So first of all, as I always like to ask, where are you tuning in from, and what state, what country? And then I will go through a couple of questions, and I will go back to some more of the solutions and go through each one of these issues, because people have sent me in questions that they need answered for each one of the problems that I pointed out. Okay, so hi Tassos, nice to see you back. Thank you for showing up and listening to the live. Let's see. So Pradeep, I hope I'm saying your name right. Hi, ma'am. I have convinced my wife about my cuckold fantasy, but she is so interested in it. Now I am not feeling good because don't know reality is so different than fantasy. True, yes. And I've talked about that in many of the other videos, how you can have an intense fantasy about something and it may seem like a great idea, but really crossing into it in a realistic way, it brings on a whole new life of its own, especially when you're talking about a cuckold situation, because now you're bringing another person into the marriage, which adds a whole new dynamic to it. And so I would say, if you have a question about that, please go back to some of my other videos, because I talk about it in detail. Okay, I see a couple of the retraction. Okay, so I think Adrian was asking a question about the difference between, it got taken off, but that was a good question, about actual masturbation and intercourse, and is there a difference? And of course, yes, there is a difference, because one is a solo act and the other is with your spouse, your partner. So that's an intimate act. And so, yeah, there's quite a difference there. All right, so let me get back to some of the other information on here, and then I will answer a few more of your questions. And again, if you have questions, you can leave them in the comment section underneath the video, or you can go to my website, thehappyspouse.com. I also have 2 books that I have published, and you can find some information on there. And I will post that below when the video is over. Okay, so let me get back to this point about the effect on the mind and the body and why it's so powerful. So oftentimes we don't take into consideration that our mind and our body, when they are working separate from each other, you can feel very disconnected. And that's what happens with masturbation, especially masturbating to a video, because now you're not connecting even with your own body. You're basically taking in information, it's turning you on, it's arousing you, and then you're masturbating to that. And if you train your mind and your body that is how you have your sexual release, and you continue to do it over and over again, many people find it difficult then to have intercourse or to be in a relationship with another human being, because they're now training themselves just to have a solo masturbation, solo orgasm. And when they go to be with their spouse or their partner, it becomes more difficult. And this happens over time, and this happens if you are having excessive masturbation. The other part I didn't talk about too much is the physical aspect of excessive masturbation. And for some people, they can get themselves into a problem where they become desensitized. And that is both mentally and physically. And this happens with both men and women. So for women, for instance, if you are masturbating with a sex toy and you are using a high vibration, or you're putting it directly on your sexual organs, what it can do is it can desensitize the feeling. It can dull the feeling, because you're basically, that is the most sensitive part of your body. And it is dulling the sensation. So when you go to have sex, you're not going to be able to recreate that with intercourse. And so then many times women get, I don't want to say addicted to, but they get used to the vibration of the sex toy. And again, that can create a problem, because then it's not just about the two of you. You're now having to bring in the toy every time to stimulate yourself. Now, the good thing about that is it's not permanent. If you stop using the toy, if you can stay away from it for a while, then the sensitivity will come back. Same thing with men. So if you're masturbating a certain way and you're being rough with yourself, then you can desensitize the very sensitive tissue and nerve endings really on the head of the penis. And when that happens, you're going to have harder sex, because you're not going to be able to get stimulated as easily, because you've desensitized yourself. And that can create a problem in a relationship where your wife or your partner, that may not be comfortable for her. So just be aware that with excessive masturbation, or any type of masturbation, is that you don't want to create a physical desensitization. And again, it's most likely not permanent. over time, it can come back. And that is that you have to learn how to either masturbate another way where you're not touching that part of your body, you're not using a toy, or you're not masturbating as much so that your body can heal. That's the physical aspect of it. But there's also a mental aspect of it because now you're training your body to react a certain way. And through that training, your body gets used to it. And so your mind gets used to it, your body gets used to it. And again, if you're doing it over and over again over a 3-month period of time, that's where the pattern develops. And so you have to slowly back away from that and create a new pattern, create a new way of masturbating. Maybe you don't use a toy, or maybe you use your hand in a different way. I do have a video on here. I think it's under the masturbation if you go in that category, and it talks about different ways to change masturbation styles and what you can do and how it physically affects you, mentally affects you. And this is a problem. I have seen more and more people who are having this issue with their just being desensitized, not only physically, but mentally. So let me talk about the mental aspect of that really quick. So mentally, if you're watching something and it's turning you on and then you get bored with it, then you're going to switch to something that's more extreme. And then you get bored with that. And then you're going to the next level. And so you continue to expand your mind sexually. And when you end up getting into a relationship or you end up being with your spouse, they're not on the same page with you and they're not being turned on by the same thing you're turned on with. And that goes back to this issue with cuckolding, which men have lived in this cuckold fantasy. So they're watching the videos, they're revving themselves up, they're getting really entrenched in the whole entire fetish. And they're so into it, and this has become such a big turn on for them when they go to have an experience with their wife. They're fully immersed in their fantasy, thinking that she wants the same thing, when reality is she hasn't been exposing herself to it. She really doesn't know much about it. And why would she be turned on by your fantasy? So, and then sometimes men will bring this up in the bedroom and thinking that their wife gets excited over it, when women just like to hear things. They like to hear sexy things sometimes, but most of the time they don't actually want to do it. And so then men will think that that's encouraging, that they get turned on mentally in the bedroom, and they'll want to take it one step further. And that's where the disaster seems to happen in some relationships with that. So just be aware of what you are watching, what is turning you on, what you're exposing yourself to. And if you find that you are having an issue with excessive masturbation, then yes, you do need to do something about it. And you do need to be serious about it. And like I said, take it one step at a time, meaning one day. So each morning you wake up, you decide what you're going to do for the day. You don't have that involved in your day, and you try to keep yourself on a positive track. You try to maybe bring some exercise into it, a hobby into it, a book, I don't know, whatever, something else that interests your mind, music, something else that interests your mind, and you just do it day by day. If you concentrate and you just look at it day by day, before long, a week will pass, 2 weeks will pass, 3 weeks will pass. And so that's how you begin to get yourself out of this excessive masturbation. And yeah, it's not easy because you've gotten used to it. And maybe you haven't found other ways to cope with stress. And so you need to realize that you've got to find some other ways to cope with stress if this has been your only outlet. And just, put yourself in a positive frame of mind and say you're going to do it and follow through with it. And by the way, a lot of men have had success with this when they go about it this way. Instead of trying to tackle it like I'm never going to be able to do this, and oh my God, it's just I don't have a way to relieve my stress. I feel horny and I don't know what to do about it. So if you look at it like, oh, I never can do this again, then some people won't even try. And what I'm telling you to do is each day, just look at it as a new day. And that's how you move forward. And that's how you get out of this cycle or this pattern that you've put yourself in. So anyway, I wanted to bring you that information today. Thank you for joining me for this live question and answer video, and I hope all of you got something from this, and I will be back next week to bring you more information and answer your questions. As you know, I believe everyone deserves to have a healthy sex life, and so do you. Make it a fantastic day.